everyone, and welcome to Translating Romania, our special event celebrating some of the brightest translators that gave Romanian literature an international voice. My name is Gabriela Mocan, and I'm the creative producer and co-curator of Romania Rocks, the first ever festival of Romanian British literature organized jointly by the Romanian Cultural Institute in London with support from the European Literature Network in the UK, featuring a stellar lineup of authors and translators and a wide variety of events over these 4 weeks. All of our events are free and easy to access thanks to London Video Stories. All the books can be purchased through our partner bookshops, and all the festival details can be found on our 2 websites. Today's conversation, followed by a special event on the 11th of November, featuring award-winning translators Sean Cotter and Philip Byrne, is kindly supported by the British Centre for Literary Translation. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our long-term collaborator and friend, Duncan Large, Professor of European Literature and Translation at University of East Anglia and Academic Director of the British Centre for Literary Translation, to address a few words of welcome to our guests today. Duncan, the Zoom floor is yours.
Many thanks, Gabriela. It's so nice to be working with you again. As Gabriela was saying, I work at the British Centre for Literary Translation, which is at the University of East Anglia in Norwich. BCLT was founded just over 30 years ago in 1989 by my predecessor as Professor of European Literature, the renowned German writer W.G. Max Sebald, who was looking to emulate the European Translators College in Strahlen, Germany, as a place to receive translators in residence working on translation projects. That's still an important part of what we do, although in the age of COVID, our residencies have, of course, had to move online along with the rest of our program. And since our foundation, we've also expanded our role in a number of ways. Our primary role now is as a research center at UEA, and in that context, we run an online research seminar in literary translation, which is open to all. We engage in translation-related research projects and host book launches and larger events. Supported by Arts Council England in partnership with the National Centre for Writing, also in Norwich, we run a varied public programme to support the development of literary translation as a profession in the UK and beyond, including an annual Sebald lecture on literary translation, a summer school in literary translation and creative writing, and in collaboration with a number of European partners, an annual European school in literary translation. So collaboration with international partners has always been a mainstay of our program. And I'm very pleased to say this is not the first time that we've worked with Romanian translators. 4 years ago, in the Shakespeare year of 2016, we worked with the British Council on a series of Shakespeare translation seminars across the world. And I had the pleasure of participating in the first, held in Cologne in Germany, with 3 parallel groups working to translate a selection of short Shakespeare texts from English into, respectively, German, Polish, and Romanian. The Romanian group was led by the distinguished translator and academic George Volchanov, and with the assistance of Gabriela and the Romanian Cultural Institute in London, I was able then to bring George over to Norwich later that year to participate in a symposium on Shakespeare in translation. So we're looking forward to collaborating on further Romanian projects in future. And I'm delighted that BCLT could be part of this wonderful cultural festival, and especially this celebration of Romanian literature in translation today. Congratulations to Rosie and colleagues on a fascinating edition of the Romanian Riveter. And congratulations to Magda, to Gabriela and Rosie on assembling such a stellar array of talent for this afternoon's mouth-watering event. I don't want to hold up proceedings any further then, except to say thank you to the organisers for inviting BCLT to be involved, and welcome all to a literary feast translating Romania.
Thank you very much, Duncan, for being with us today and for all the support you and the British Centre for Literary Translation has given to us. I'm thinking of America's groundbreaking writer and critic, George Steiner, who used to say that without translation, we would be living in provinces bordering on silence. These are words that I fully endorse. And because I believe that silence can be good, but still in moderation, I'm extremely happy to introduce you to my star guests for today. Jozefina Komporaly, Diana Manole, Philip O'Haley, Gabi Reigh, Andreea Scridon, Adam Sorkin, and Lidia Aviano in alphabetical order. Our fabulous group should have been completed by Alistair Ian Blythe, the man to whom Romanian literature and Romania owes an impressive number of translated books. I can assure you that his absence today is only on camera, for I'm sure that he must be translating something even now while we're talking. Unfortunately, he could not be with us due to a very nagging cold. But let me now turn to my Zoom living room guests who got here from Romania, the UK, America, and Canada. Welcome, everyone. It's a great joy to be together with all of you again, and thank you for joining our Romania Rocks Club. I must say that all of you are wearing quite a few hats, and it would be unjust of me to simply label you as translators. This would definitely not do you justice. So I will start in no particular order with Lydia Aviano, who is also a writer, critic, and professor of contemporary British literature at the University of Bucharest, as well as the director of Contemporary Literature Press. Lydia published extensively, her translations to date counting no fewer than 40 books, and we had the pleasure of working together on the recent Romanian Riveta magazine, published by the European Literature Network in the UK with funding from Timiș Council in Romania. Welcome, Lydia. Thank you for being with us today. And my first question for you would be, could you please tell us a little bit more about the aims and the origins of the publishing house that you are running?
It all started with my being able to organize the MA program, and the students needed practice. And some of the practice is editing and book writing. So I thought, why not a publishing house? So I began it under the University of Bucharest, of course. And then, of course, you came along as the first important patron we could have. And then the Writers' Union. And finally, I thought this is not just a publishing house of books to be read. Since it's for the students, it should be a publishing house that helps the teaching of English via its literature. So that's how we began, and our specific is publishing bilingually. So we publish the English and the Romanian version, either English books translated or Romanian books translated. And we have quite an impressive number of books by now, almost 500. And they are very, very well accessed. I'm very happy to see. We mean to go on, and we mean to make a larger team, because right now it's been me and me and me. But we really mean to have a team. And probably one of the best achievements of this publishing house is an extraordinary manual, which only those who have read Finnegan's Wake can understand, in 130 volumes. It's a manual of Finnegan's Wake, which practically brings together everything that has been written about Finnegan's Wake, and a linearized text of Finnegan's Wake, because with Finnegan's Wake you can't change a letter. from the original print. So if we are known for anything, practically this is the main thing that we are known for, the 130 volume handbook of Finnegan's Wake, which was initiated and coordinated by my former colleague, Professor George Sandulescu, who was a very well-known Joycean himself.
You are also running a master's program in translation with so many students. I was impressed of the number of students that are actually attending your course. And I wanted to ask you, which are the skills that these students mostly acquire on this course?
This is a painful case. That is, we are teaching a job that no longer brings the possibility to make a living. So, of course, our hobby and our passion will always be translating literature. But we have to give these students some way of making a living. And if I don't want to push them in the arms of the multinational, international, and so on firms that will give them a lot of money, take away their day, and eventually disappear, leaving them with no job, I have to be inventive. So, on the one hand, we teach them English. Basically, they have to know English. And we do that choosing to teach English via a literary text, because that is a very correct and rich vocabulary. Second, we teach them how to edit a book, which comes in handy. Some of our students, I think, managed to get a job in England on the basis of what they did, the CV they managed to acquire during the MA program. So they learn how to edit, how to confront, how to proofread. So they learn everything we can give them about how to make a book, what books to choose. They teach us what books to choose, because reading changes from generation to generation. But on the other hand, we try to help them translate other kinds of cultural texts. So it's not just literary. They translate, for instance, the site of Radio Romania, classical musical Romanian station, one of the best in Europe, and their site in English is translated exclusively by our students. We are very happy to do that. Of course, everything that goes on with us is non-profit. The publishing house, everything we translate, it's voluntary, and students do volunteer. And I'm trying to catch at every opportunity that can push them in the direction of a decent job. So I invite anybody I can, and I try to publish them. This year we published a book about the C virus. I called it because I hate the name COVID and coronavirus. So we talked about the C virus homework, and we have such a big book published on paper by a temporary editor, and they wrote it. It is their diary during the first months, when we hoped it would go away very soon. And the second book of the same kind will be Live on Zoom, as I told Mihai. Wonderful title. And if he allows me, I'm going to use it, and I'll send you the book.
I think your students are extremely lucky to have a professor and mentor like you, Lydia.
Thank you.
And it would be lovely to hear now a fragment of your translated work. What are you going to share with us today?
It's a book that is still looking for a publisher, hopefully in England. I'm not sure we'll manage to do that. In Romanian, I can publish it. But this is such a good poet that it's worth being published in English for an English eye. I've chosen, his name is Robert Sherban from Timișoara. I've chosen very short poems so that they won't be difficult to follow. One of them says, I am being watched. All of a sudden, I sense I'm being watched. I halt. I look around and up. An ant walks away from under my soul and goes on about its business. Scales. I'm a set of scales whose plates are no longer connected to each other. Broken glass. Have you ever broken a bottle? Have you picked up the broken glass? Have you cut your fingers? Well, friends are like broken glass. Even though they make your hands bleed, you continue to pick them up. Mirror. The sky is always beautiful because the sky is the mirror in which we never see ourselves, however hard we might stare. And the last one, carmine bag. You find a woman's bag on the pavement. Elegant, small, carmine red. And the last thing that comes to mind when you open it is money.
Thank you, Lydia.
Very welcome.
Before I go on, I would like to say that everybody who is watching this now is welcome to address any questions or comments. Please do so in the box you have in the event. And if we have a chance at the end, we are going to answer them, address them. If not, we promise that we will all get back to you with our individual answers. So I will now continue with Adam Sorkin. I remember meeting Adam in London in 2016 when we launched the all-Romanian issue of Poem magazine, edited and run by poet Fiona Sampson, one of the greatest friends of Romanian poetry and literature in England. This magazine contains poems beautifully translated by Adam. It was a joy to meet him then as well as today. Adam is also Distinguished Professor of English Emeritus at Penn State Brandywine and has 65 books of Romanian translation in print and accepted for publication this year.
I wish they were all in print.
Adam, since I have this opportunity now, ask you something that I believe everybody would be interested to know. What first inspired you to translate Romanian literature?
That's a story I've told a number of times. In the spring of 1981, someone came to my office. I was a Fulbright lecturer at the University of Bucharest. This is Irina Pana, who's back in Romania after being in Australia for a while. Came and said she had this translation of the Timișoara poet, Angel Dumbravianu, and she wanted me to go over it. I did, and I made some corrections, made some changes, and I got, as it were, hooked on translation. I found it much more interesting, much more rewarding, much more creative than writing another article on something that already has 5 or 10 or 15 articles on it. The only difference now is you use a new, I'm cynical about this, a new critical theoretical apparatus. So it really changed my career entirely. Coming as a Fulbrighter to Romania, I was supposed to be presenting, in some ways, the idea as American propaganda, but instead, I was the one who was changed. And I worked since then collaboratively, as I did from that first time, because we went over it in the office over and again and again and again. And I've worked with Lydia, I've worked with Diana, I've worked with Andrea. I think, you say I've done the translation, but I think that it's always we. And I always give full credit to my co-translator. But I've continued to do it. It keeps me off the streets. So really, since 1981, I've said this before, I'm a 39-year-old translator.
That's amazing. And I believe that after this event today, you will most probably work with Gabi, Jozefina, and Philip as well.
Who knows?
What can you tell us about this collaborative experience in translating?
It's been very interesting in a lot of different ways. So for some people, I've worked with fellow translators, scholars, and with poets themselves, including some very, important names. I'm not going to go through a list. This is silly. But at times, most interestingly, the ones who give me the most freedom are often the writers. If they know English, they know the differences in the way English sounds, the requirements of English to have pronouns that are gendered, the requirement of English to have pronouns. A number of times poets have said, do you have to use he or she? Well, yes. You can't just not do it. There have been other very small things and much larger things. I've had people say, big arguments with somebody whom I know very well, and we've worked it out. You're ruining my poem. I think the argument was about the use of definite versus indefinite articles, which is different between the two languages. It's a very, and other times I've had poets change their poems. I don't like this anymore. Why don't you use this phrasing? On the other hand, working with people who aren't the writers, it's a very rich experience. It's kind of a friendship. It's a kind of collaborative social activity at the same time as translating a third party poet or poet. I don't use poetess. I know a lot of Romanians translate that word. That is not a good word in English. It's a put down. It's been absolutely interested in what I'm doing. And I've always taught American literature and more prose than poetry, but this is like the other side of my existence. And now that I'm retired, it is what I do.
I will actually look back on one of your collaborative experiences now with Diana Manole, who is also here with us today. And refer to a very happy moment in 2018 when you and Diana got the second prize in the John Dryden translation competition for your translation of Emilian Galaicu Poun's poetry. That was a really wonderful moment. Sadly, neither of you was able to travel to London for that, and I was the happy messenger who took that prize for you from Dr. Richard Hibbett of the University of Leeds. Are you going to delight us with some of these poems today, or have you prepared something else?
No, I thought actually it's a complex, when you deal with Emilian, it's always a complex poem. The earlier ones are short, very often poems of sex, love, and some degree of ironic politics when he could. The later poems are much more complex. This is not one of the ones that was in the prize group that we sent, but I'd like to read a more recent poem. We've done a book called Canting Arms. Canting, I've seen it misprinted. Canting is a heraldic term that when you have heraldic symbols and they're puns, they're called canting arms, or coat of arms. He sent it after we had translated. It was from two previous books of his, two collections. It's called Brother Emil. If I may, it's going to be a little long, but let me give it a try. There are two references, probably all of you know them. Rebrianu, Lydia Aviano, his brother Emil, was hanged in 1917 by the Austro-Hungarians when he was caught crossing the border. And the other is Ivanescu, Mircea Ivanescu, whose brother committed suicide. If you don't have a hanged brother, Emil, like Rebrianu, it's useless to try to write prose. Better than a plumb bob on a string is the brother's noose for a boost in precision. A grandfather clock requires winding, yet it still falls behind now and then. For while brother Emil, the cuckoo clock, struck right at the hour, especially if you write a novel, there's no way you can do without a brother Emil swinging from the gallows for high treason. All the higher as his brother's deed, not to shoot those of his own blood, is more debasing. There's no replacement for a brother Emil, no matter how many classes of lieutenants graduate from military schools from this day on. If you've a brother, you've a book. The history of Romanian literature bears witness. As many dear spirits hang around, that's how many kibitzers you play in your brother's name, the hangman card. And the writing desk frolics under your elbows, just like the stool under brother Emil's feet, a world in suspense. No one should dare sit at the writing table, dissection table, wake table, it's all the same, who doesn't have a brother Emil, a suicide like Ivanescu's. One day later than he decided to, because that evening he couldn't miss a concert. Poetry is someone else, a being departed before its time, who gets continued in the lines of those who remain in their own image, growing together. That might be a good definition of translation too. From the other, not from himself, the poet sets forth. The same as with the serial suicide through predecessors. If God hasn't given you a brother Emil, don't let poetry cross your mind. Better than the silencer installed on the gun barrel is this young temple when it pushes you towards writing cerebral poems. And what a relief that the hand that writes isn't what must place the full stop, pulling the trigger. All your life, you feel guilty about that, even if you have no guilt, ends up usurping the role of self-consciousness. A name predestined to fit you like a glove. Don't confuse their hands. The hanged man and the suicides. Take the hand of one, then the other. Don't confuse their names. Brother Emil, the first, as much lacking as the second one's absent, and who scheduled a meeting on your chest like two post-mortem medals in the rank of knight of the sorrowful countenance. An officer of the reserves, you play orderly now to one, line up, then to the other, at ease. The same eternal lieutenant. It's simply that there's no one, unless you're your own brother Emil to yourself, to take his place. Let yourself be written by brother Emil in absentia, before brother Emil gives up writing, only so that in the end, even you can make good, bad, a name for yourself. Now, in the first person, I'm brother Emil, the hanged man and the suicide of tomorrow, playing games. I lost my life at cards, at reading cards, at writing cards, my life. Names are all as if from the dead, given gratuitously, when there's no one to call you, Mon M. And that M is EM.
Thank you, Adam. Quite a dramatic moment there. And I'll continue with Jozefina.
Sorry, that was a little bit long. I apologize, but.
No, that was really, really nice and welcome. You kind of passed the ball to me, and in this case, given the drama in the translation, I'll continue with a translator who works on dramatic texts, Jozefina Komporaly. Jozefina lectures at the University of the Arts London. She translates from Romanian and Hungarian into English and has authored numerous publications on theatre. I remember meeting her in 2015 when RCI London launched Matei Vișniec's first anthology in English, entitled How to Explain the History of Communism to Mental Patients and Other Plays, which Jozefina herself has translated. Welcome, Jozefina. And I have the first question for you would be, how did you actually start translating drama?
Thank you for the invitation, Gabriela. Well, how did I translate drama? By chance, really. So as you yourself pointed out, I'm an academic and I've been working as a theatre academic for almost 20 years now in a UK context. And I did a PhD in drama. And my initial aim was just to teach and possibly write academic text. But then over the years, I kind of got somewhat annoyed by the lack of diversity in sort of dramatic literature that is being taught. And I felt that there was a need for more current text coming from a broader range of countries that our students could draw on through their studies. And this is how I ended up turning to the work of Matej Wiśniewski that I have been familiar with for a long time. And in fact, in the early days, I wasn't necessarily thinking of translating myself. I was thinking of, to an extent, promoting the work of other translators. And actually, in this anthology that you kindly mentioned, I've included translations by other translators who have started this work prior to me. So I always thought about this as a sort of work of cultural ambassadorialism, if you like, of the cultural exchange, of drawing on existing translations and, of course, keeping up with the incredibly prolific work of the playwright and then generating, of course, new translations as we go along. So since then, I've been working on more recent texts by Matej as well, and then hoping to put them out there and persuade also as much as possible theatre companies to put them on. So in addition to the published text, we also have staged versions as much as indeed possible in the circumstances.
How is translating drama different from translating other literary genres?
Well, it has a different dimension. In the case of Matej Wiśniewski, but also other playwrights, there is certainly a very strong literary element. And as we've seen, they do get published, so they work as texts and they're part of drama, which is, of course, a genre of literature. But also, drama ideally is being staged and put on by theatre companies and are watched by audiences, in which case we want an open text that can respond to the directorial vision of a given company. And it is also manageable in terms of speakability and performability. So the actors, the performers can actually say those words. They can breathe, as it were, whilst trying to pronounce sometimes very kind of complex words. So bearing in mind this duality, I think is really important. And another thing that I really love about drama translation, that it's never ever complete, because should we be lucky that a particular text is staged on over and over again, in time it gets changed because it resonates with the directorial concept, with the moment and time when the play is put on. So it is never really complete. There's always a change, there's always an alteration, there's always a negotiation. So hopefully the text stays live and fresh.
I was wondering now, while you're translating, and especially when you have the end result, to put it that way, if you ever perform your own translations. And I will invite you now to actually read a fragment. I presume it's going to be probably another fragment from Matej Wiśniewski's text, or maybe Andrea Scridon, whom you've also translated.
Well, I wouldn't say I perform them. I'm occasionally reading them, and I'm trying, of course, to not make it totally flat, but I've never really been an actor myself, apart from my kind of early days when I was a student. So I much prefer it if professional actors read these texts, or indeed the playwrights themselves, who we have seen at the recent launch of The Riveter, can work really well, where Matej Wiśniewski read his own an extract. But yes, I'm trying as I work to hear the text very much, and I read it out loud myself. I use my family quite extensively in reading out text, and I'm lucky enough to work with performers and indeed students in the workshopping process. So a lot of time is being spent on hearing how a particular solution might sound in English, and I go through many drafts until I reach a version which, as I said earlier, is never final, but it is, you know, ready to be shared. Let's put it that way. And what I've chosen for today is work in progress. It is indeed by Matej Višněk, because I just felt that I could not choose anybody else for this particular situation. And also because I'm working on this text and I'm hoping to have it published. I do not have a theatre company lined up for this yet, but I have read this extract with a number of other people with whom I regularly workshop theatre translation. So it has been tested a bit, but as I say, it is not finished and it hasn't been published yet. So it's kind of new. So if you like, I can turn to it. It's about 5 minutes long, so hopefully we have that much time in this particular situation. So it is an extract from a play called The Man Who Had All His Malice Removed by Matej Višněk, that he's written in Romanian as well as in French, as he often does. He writes versions of his plays in both these languages. I tend to translate from the Romanian, I should say, but I often read the French and might take solutions from that into account as well. This is a scene about, let's say, halfway through the play, and it's a monologue of sorts. I've chosen it to not to have to do too many voices. It focuses on a character called Eric, who is a celebrity journalist. And the play deals to a great extent with the influence of media on our lives and with kind of globalization occasionally going wrong. The title of the scene is Journalism Without Hypocrisy, Lesson 2. Eric rolls in a number of bizarre gadgets, smilometers, used to measure various degrees and types of smile. He demonstrates a smile. Look, my eyes feel slightly moist, my face relaxed, my mouth half open and curved up. To mark the beginning of the 10 o'clock news, I have 10 different facial expressions to choose from. He points to the 10 smilometers displayed on trolleys. They look like devices used to test eye vision, but also like miniature guillotines. 10 actors place their chins on their respective smilometers. Moving from one to the other, Eric sets their respective smile levels. This is a smilometer invented by myself, with which I can select the relevant smile for each occasion. With this device, I can set the expression that corresponds to the first 2 or 3 news items of the day, or even the entire news bulletin. Level 0 is an almost audible laugh. I use it on festive occasions, for New Year or Christmas, or when our country wins the World Cup, or when it attracts global attention for some amazing achievement. It is absolutely essential that no catastrophe or murder attempt should disrupt such a day. He models the expression corresponding to level 0. Level 1 is a massive smile, accomplice, even witty. He resets the expression on the actor's face to make it correspond to level 1. Level 2 is a calm and soothing smile, a sort of slide through which words flow straight into the listener's ears. The same procedure. He sets the relevant expression for level 2. Level 3 is a formal, flat smile, which doesn't give much away about the mood of the forthcoming half an hour. To put it differently, viewers can be prepared for pretty much anything. He sets the face attached to smilometer 3 to the relevant expression. Level 4 is a censored and repressed smile, as if it wanted to alert viewers. I'm a warm and open person, but what I have to tell you unfortunately forces me to adopt a somber tone. Fine-tunes the face to reflect subtle details. Level 5 is just a shadow of a smile, a passing glimpse of old friends, meaning, oh, how I'd like to spend some time with you, but this breaking news won't allow me. The face in smilometer 6 might repeat, oh, how I'd like to spend some time with you, but this breaking news won't allow me. Level 6 is reserved for professional sobriety. The expression is still humane, but could barely be classed as considerate, as if I wanted to warn viewers, sorry, what you are about to hear isn't pleasant, but you have to learn about it regardless. Eric resets the expression. Level 7 is an expression of controlled concern. It is the expression for announcing a plane crash, an earthquake, or perhaps a terror attack. Level 7 conveys the message, let's keep calm and assess things together, responsibly and in dignity. Expression. Wand in hand, Eric remodels the face and adjusts the expression at the corner of the mouth. Level 8 is almost a frown, an expression of obvious refusal regarding the enormity of the forthcoming announcement. With this, I warn those who have just tuned in that I will talk about things I consider abhorring, events that repulse me, and that in addition to information I'm about to broadcast, I also invite my audience to join me in condemning these events. How is it possible that on an island in the Mediterranean, where thousands of people spend their dream holiday, the sea should bring to the shore the bodies of hundreds of African immigrants drowned while attempting to make it to Europe? Eric keeps adjusting the face in Expressometer 9 until the dead bodies of illegal immigrants can be glimpsed in reflection. Level 9 is the expression that corresponds to national mourning. It heralds disastrous news. It's a warning that after watching my broadcast, nobody would be carry on with their usual activities, have dinner, watch film, or go to bed in peace. It's the expression I adopt whenever there's a nuclear explosion and radioactive clouds are heading towards us. I made use of this expression when the Chernobyl nuclear plant exploded back in April 1986. Eric sets the same expression on his own face as in the smilometer number 10. See? All done.
Okay, now let's continue, I suggest, with our second guest from the UK, Gabi Reigh. Gabi Reigh, whom I met in 2019, when her translation of Lucian Blaga's Poems of Light was launched in conjunction with Romania's participation at the London Book Fair. In 2017, she won the Stephen Spender Prize for Poetry in Translation, and in 2019, her translation of Mihail Sebastian's The Town with Acacia Trees won the first time. It was the first ever Romanian text that won the PEN Translates Award. Besides being a prolific translator, as you can tell by now, Gabi also teaches A-level English at a sixth form college in Hampshire. Welcome, Gabi. And I know you started a series entitled Interwar series. You translate literature from the interwar period. What made you do this? What made you want to launch this series?
Hi. I mean, the main reason why I wanted to translate them is because I like the books and because I think they're important. Like Lydia was saying, translation's not exactly like a money spinner, so you might as well kind of translate the books that you like and you enjoy. I also think that, there's something kind of quite surprising, always when I read these books, there's something kind of surprisingly modern, and I always feel like I'm discovering something new about that age and seeing kind of both contrasts and parallels to ours in terms of how people lived, how people loved, and so on. For example, you mentioned The Town with Acacia Trees, and that was the first novel that I translated. And the thing that really grabbed me about that was the fact that it starts, the first chapter is called First Blood, and it's about a girl getting her first period. And, you know, I was really sort of surprised to see a book written by a male writer in the 1930s about something that's still kind of quite a taboo thing even now to write about, and other things that he writes about as well in that novel with a great deal of, you know, sensitivity and empathy, like a doomed lesbian relationship. There's something, you know, I felt that I was discovering about that world, and that's why I enjoyed them. And about the question about it being important as well, you know, Duncan mentioned in the introduction about the project that they did where they translated Shakespeare in lots of different countries. And that made me think that, you know, everybody around the world knows Shakespeare. Everybody around the world generally knows Jane Austen or Dickens. And, you know, English has kind of got this kind of very dominant culture, and people in Romania would have read all these books. But people haven't read the classics of Romanian literature. They have read the classics of other literatures. So, for example, before reading the Romanian Riveter, I read the German Riveter, and there was in the editorial there, the editor had said that research in the German Riveter had given him the opportunity to find out about contemporary German literature. But before that, he'd been familiar with the classics of German literature. So, for example, Thomas Mann. And so there's certain kind of literatures like French, German, Italian, you know, that people feel like they ought to read, you know, people feel like they've got to say that they've read, you know, Proust and Thomas Mann and Dante or whatever. But there's lots of other kind of literary heritages of other countries that are still kind of yet undiscovered, and I think that's kind of a shame, really, because I think particularly like these books, you know, which are the ones that I'm translating, I'm seeing sort of as the canon, I guess, the books that are artistically accomplished, they've sort of lasted the test of time, you know, they're really kind of, you know, good, valuable books. And the roots of contemporary literature, like the poem, for example, that Adam read out, you know, that's got its roots in Rebreanu, that's got its roots in Ionescu. And so you need to kind of know what the roots are, I think, before you can properly understand, you know, a contemporary literature. And so yeah, so kind of that's kind of the main reason, really. So.
Are you thinking of translating anything else outside this particular historical period?
Yes, I have, and I tended to translate sort of modern poetry and essays, and so on. I tend to want to find literature written by women, because in the, you know, contemporary literature written by women. So I've translated Ruxandra Cesareanu, some poetry and some essays, and other ones too. And you know, because I'm aware that kind of, you know, the interwar period is fairly male-dominated in terms of the men I've translated. But I do also want to translate more women writers as well from that period too, ones that are well-known, like Hortensia Papadat-Bengescu, but ones that are like less well-known, like Sorana Gurian. Gianca Cernat, an academic in Romania, has written a really interesting book about interbellum women writers, and so that's kind of introduced me to lots of really interesting people that perhaps should sort of have their voices heard a bit more. So.
Are you going to take us to some interwar Romanian literature today?
Yes, yes. It's funny because there's a connection there to what Adam was talking about, Rebreanu. So it's from a Rebreanu novel, but it's not the one about the hanged brother. It's another one. It's Ciuleandra, written in 1927. And I translated this one after I translated the Mihail Sebastian novels and play. You know, I was kind of struck that even though it was kind of at a different, the similar sort of time period when they're written, they have very different styles. So to me, I think Sebastian is kind of, you know, this master of understatement and bathos, and I like that in his work. But I think Rebreanu is a bit more dramatic. So this book is like a psychological thriller almost. It's about an aristocrat who murders his peasant-born wife and then is sent by his father to an asylum where, hoping to sort of escape sort of punishment. And he tells the psychiatrist, who is also not all he seems, he tells him this story about how he met his wife and how he murdered his wife. So the bit I'm going to read is about the Ciuleandra, which is the dance where they he had first met his wife, and it's the dance that begins to obsess the main character and also becomes a sort of symbol for the complex relationship between the urban world and the rural world, that kind of sense of fascination and repulsion, I guess. So I'll read that if that's okay. So just have some water first. Okay. So anyway, I came back from the war a sub-lieutenant, like everyone else. I hadn't seen any action, of course, hadn't been anywhere near a battlefield. My father was very careful that I shouldn't become a hero. And then, as soon as I was out of uniform, he told me that he wanted to see me married straight away. Very well then, let him find me a wife and I would be ready. But before he could, he made a gesture with his hand. I don't know how he was planning to find a girl to my liking. I never asked him. Still, one Sunday, the old man decided that we would drive to my uncle's estate in Argeș, Mănești, and spend around 3 days there. We were supposed to leave early so that we would get there at midday, but because my father had some unforeseen business to attend to, it was almost lunchtime before we left. We estimated we would arrive there at 3. On account of the bad roads and our worn tires, my father has always been mean when it comes to spending money on the car, we had several minor breakdowns, so that it's already 5 by the time we decided to stop in a village at least an hour away from Mănești. We were running out of petrol and starving, and then we chanced upon this inn by the side of the road, a miserable place, just like the rest of the village. But what could we do? We stopped there to grab something to eat and for the chauffeur to refuel the car. The innkeeper, a very shady character, insisted on preparing us a banquet and suggested that we should go and watch the village dance, saying that there would be many beautiful girls there and that the dance would take place just in the backyard of the inn. Because we didn't seem keen, the innkeeper insisted. You must see the Ciuleandra if nothing else. They don't dance it anywhere like we do here. Our fiddlers are the best. It's a fine thing to see. Yes, Ciuleandra, the doctor murmured, very quietly, listening with a cold gleam in his eyes. Have you heard of this strange dance before? Puiu cut in immediately, surprised and delighted at the same time. Yes, the doctor replied, unexpectedly startled, immediately regretting that the words had escaped his mouth. There was a pause. Puiu smiled confusedly, waiting for the doctor to continue. Then, frustrated by his long silence, he resumed his story irritably. Well, yes, Ciuleandra. Anyway, the innkeeper led us to a veranda from which we could watch the dance as if from a box at the theatre. At first, perhaps because I was hungry, I didn't think it was anything special. It was a village gathering like any other. The girls were so-so, the lads even less impressive. Besides, their dancing was fairly ordinary, spiritless. And then the Ciuleandra began. Well, doctor, anyone who hasn't watched the Ciuleandra could never understand how intoxicating it is, Puiu exclaimed fervently, his eyes burning with ecstasy. It starts just like any other dance, very slow, very restrained. The dancers gather, form a circle, choose their partners, guided by lust or maybe at random. Stirred by the heat of those bodies, the music quickens, grows wilder. The rhythm of the dance catches its frenzy. The dancers, gripping each other by the waist, build out of their bodies a wall that sways, tilts, writhes and trembles in thrall to the music. As the fiddlers warm to their instrument, the melody twitches, spins loose, explodes into chaos. Sparks seem to fly as the lads scissor their legs, pounding the dust, leaping fearlessly through the air, shrieking with delight. And then suddenly everyone is swept up in a whirlwind, tearing the ground with sharp, swift kicks, flying. The living wall sways right, sways left. The fiddlers mercilessly pinch at their strings, the sound sharpened and coarsened by their savage cries. mirroring each other, then swallowed back into the tide of rhythm. And now the circle, spinning and coiling tighter like a formidable snake, begins to shrink, collapse onto itself until it becomes a heap of burning flesh that writhes, fixed in the center for a moment, only to loosen all of a sudden, mollified, tamed, exposing the raw, scorching joy branded on the dancers' faces. But the musicians, vexed by this lull, must have their revenge, and their tune screeches out harder, deeper, more insistent. The ring of dancers, daring themselves to defy and smother the music's spell, charge at it, feet crushing into dirt, and the tornado of flesh twists into itself again, tighter, more stubborn, clenching and loosening, until finally the bodies melt into each other like a fallen harvest. There, fixed in that spot for a few minutes, for an eternity, possessed by the same maniacal rhythm, the bodies of men and women knead into each other, quivering, thrumming. Once in a while, the simmering passion is pierced by long shrieks, erupting as if from ancient depths, or by the startled cry of a girl whose breasts were clenched too tightly. And that's how it would go on until each dancer's soul melted into that all-encompassing flame of unbridled passion. But then, abruptly, like a cord sharply cut, the rhythm suddenly unravels and the young bodies splinter away with hoots of savage laughter and groans of pleasure satisfied, so that even the valleys seem to fill with trembling, as if the fury of human passion had unleashed the suppressed tremors of lust asleep in the earth.
We are now moving to Canada, and I will welcome Diana Manole, who is a Romanian-Canadian scholar and writer, whose translations have been published in Romania and abroad. Diana holds a doctorate from the University of Toronto, and she teaches literature, creative writing, and theater, as well at universities in Canada. As I said before, it was a great joy for me to receive the award that she and Adam Sorkin received in 2018 for their translations of Emilian Galaicu poem. But of course, Diana has worked on several other wonderful translations. One of them, and this is my first question to you, Diana, I know you have translated Mihaela Dragan's play for the Roma Heroes anthology. And I would like to ask you, what kind of an insight do you think this play offers in the lives of the Roma community?
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you very much for organizing this fascinating panel. I am so delighted to listen to everybody. Yeah, I translated Mihaela Dragan's play, and I owe that to Adam. He first recommended me to edit the translation, and that was impossible. I had to retranslate it, because this is a documentary drama. Mihaela Dragan, it was published, in Roma Heroes, as Gabriela said. And I think this is an amazing event. It was published by Independent Theatre Hungary and Women for the Future Association in Budapest, Hungary. To my knowledge and to their knowledge, this is the first time ever when a collection of Roma plays is being put together. So it's a historical event, really. And Mihaela's specific play is a documentary play. It is based on real life interviews. So she has talked to many Roma women in Romania. She also tells her own story, and it gives the range of the different kinds of life those women have in Romania. It also gives a glimpse into the kind of internal and external oppression and sexism and patriarchal values they face in Romania. And each of them, and this is one of the amazing things in Mihaela's play, each of them talks in a specific way. When the play arrived into my inbox, thanks to Adam's recommendation of me to the publisher, I was very disappointed to notice that it was translated into standard English, which means that it has lost exactly the first, like Jozefina said, it has lost the language's ability to portray each character, and it has lost the flavor, and it has lost the cultural specificity. So I couldn't edit the play. I ended up retranslating the play. And one thing I am very happy, I am very proud about is that I rejected the idea of using a well-known English sociolect or an English dialect or of a specific geographical part of the world where people talk in English, or to use the specific way of talking of another minority. I mean, I didn't want to translate the Romanian Roma women using the language of another oppressed minority somewhere else in the world. The difficulty was that I invented my own kind of broken English with its own special mistakes and, words, the unfinished words and so on and so on, because I was hoping to give the English readers and hopefully the English audiences one day to give them a chance to really know these women. They are women with very rich lives, yeah. And I will give you an example. I posted a recent question on Facebook. How do you translate Tulai Doamne? Yeah, and I got some great answers on Facebook. Thank you. They sent to me a second translation, and it's the same story. It's translated into standard in literary English. It doesn't even use contractions. Yeah, I'm happy, and I hope to direct and produce this play one day in Toronto. I am also a theater director. Thank you.
It's wonderful that you actually can do both things, but you also translate poetry, and you translated quite recently, I believe, if I'm not wrong, some poetry by Nora Yuga, who is one of Romania's foremost writers and a favorite of mine, I confess. What can you tell us about this translation?
Thank you. I started translated books. I've started translating into English with Adam Sorkin, and I can vouch that he is a wonderful mentor, and he's a wonderful friend. And we translated together the Hunchback's Bus, which was longlisted for a National Poetry Prize by Altai in the US. And then we translated the second collection, Dangerous Caprices, for which we are still looking for a publisher. And now I'm translating by myself. I'm hoping I grew up, and I am translating alone Nora Yuga's anthology, The Heart Like a Boxer's Fist. And as probably most of you know, she is one of the most important, most productive, and most interesting Romanian writers. She's going to turn 90 this January, and she has just published a novel, Hypodrome, of over 400 pages. What fewer people know is that after her second book, The Circle's Captivity in 1970, the book itself was banned. It was, all copies were destroyed. Nora Yuga was banned for publishing for 8 years. And after Ceausescu rose to power and we had those political thaw, she was finally unbanned. while she was banned, she wrote poems. She told me on the phone, we've become long-term friends. She wrote poems on paper napkins, usually at the Romanian writers' restaurant in Bucharest, after many shots of vodka. And she stored them in a drawer. And she never thought that she was going to publish them. After she was allowed to publish again, she was asked for a book. And she opened the drawer, found all those paper napkins, put them together, and she discovered that she had a book. And she published this drawer book in both senses. It was Opinions About Pain, 1980, and it got her first Romanian Writers Union award, which was at the time the most important Romanian literary award. I have started with these poems from her anthology, and they are as challenging as anything else by Nora Yuga to translate. But they also, it was an emotionally charged translation process, because I was kind of thrilled and overwhelmed by the fact that those poems have also, in my view, historical importance. My feeling, if I may use a metaphor, was that I was literally holding the paper napkins from the 70s and translating. And I had to be careful to do them justice.
It's a wonderful story, actually. And I really hope that this is what you have prepared to read to us today, some poetry.
I did. I hope I may. I am checking the time here. I would very much want to read two short poems, but if I may, I would like to read the first one first in Romanian. Oh, I want to mention, sorry, in brief, she's a surrealist poet, and it's not easy to publish poems by Nora Yuga because, well, last summer, my submission was rejected by the volunteer readers at the Canadian magazine. And this summer I was asked for a submission. I sent the same poems and the editor-in-chief loved them. And this next week, probably, she's going to have 8 pages, 6 poems in a Canadian magazine. My point is sometimes it's too complex for the undergraduate students who are volunteer readers at magazines. Aș putea să mă întorc, nu mă amână nimic. Împrejur e un gard și în mijloc un greier. Se ciocnesc din când în când 2 rotițe de ceas. Ți-aș spune că a căzut o bilă câștigătoare în labirint. Și totuși, uneori, un copac seamănă cu o mână întinsă, așteptând ceva mai omenesc. Și este iar ieri, totul este ieri, de parcă am murit dinainte. In the labyrinth, I could come back. Nothing postpones me. There is a fence around me and a cricket in the middle. Cogwheels grind sometimes. I'd like to tell you that the winning lottery ball dropped into the labyrinth. Maybe that's life. And yet sometimes a tree looks like an outstretched hand, waiting for something more human. And it's yesterday. Again, everything is yesterday, as if I've died in advance. Can I read another very short one?
Yes, please do.
Sorry, my voice left me suddenly. In a chalk pit. If earth and flesh are meant to hurt, and like a wound, the soil opens when you bury the carcass of a dog whose nerve will stretch with a harp life like sound. It's my bone, the one talking alone in its sleep of strange convoys. It's my foretelling nail, cutting off the edges of a world. Along the veins of earth, a lizard passes, and in a chalk pit, the song makes secret detours. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well, Diana. Wonderful poetry. And we are now moving back to Romania, and I would like to introduce Filip Ó Ceallaigh now, who is an author in his own right, whose short stories brought him the Rooney Prize for Irish Literature. His work has appeared in prominent literary magazines and has been translated in 30 languages, if I'm not wrong. We met in 2016 in London, where his translation of Mihail Sebastian's For 2000 Years was launched at the RCI as part of Romania's participation at the London Book Fair. Filip, it's nice to have you with us. And I wanted to ask you, because our event in 2016 was quite a successful one. And it's not the event in itself, but the reception that Sebastian's work had in the UK. How can you comment on this amazing reception that his work had in the United Kingdom?
Nice to see you again, Gabriela. There's something about publishing is very unpredictable. Publishers themselves can't predict the effect a book is going to have, the reception. I couldn't have predicted the success that the book had either. Nobody asked me to publish it. I translated it back in, I think it was between 2006 and 2009, just because I liked it, and then had it for about 6 years, where I was trying to interest a publisher. I was sending it to small university publishers, odd sort of publishers that specialized in translation, like Dalkey Press, Dalkey Archive Press. No one was interested in it. And at that point in 2015, it was coming up to the time when the rights on Sebastian's work expired 70 years after his death. So at that point, it wasn't necessary to negotiate with the estate. And I was thinking of just putting it on the internet, just so that it'd be available to scholars. Because Sebastian's diaries had been published in 2000. And it hadn't been a massive bestseller, but it had been quite interesting in that it had quite an elite readership. I mean, people who were interested in the interwar period, people who were interested in the rise of fascism, had read it. You know, it had already been written by the most important historians of that, people like Tony Judd, Timothy Snyder referred to Sebastian when talking about the rise of European fascism. And, you know, a lot of writers had read it, but the book, it was a big book, so it didn't have a mass readership. So by the time Penguin Modern Classics approached me, it was, I suppose, 2015. I was about to give it away for free. So it was a nice surprise. It ended well in that sense, and I think it was pretty lucky in the sense that I hadn't been able to publish it before, because at that point people suddenly become very interested in the 1930s and the themes for 2000 years. You know, it was around the time of, by the time it was published in 2016, then there was the Brexit issue, and Trump was coming along, and whole debate about how to deal with the influx of refugees to Europe. There were a lot of reasons why people wanted to look at the lessons of the 1930s again, and all these things help.
I know you've worked on other translations as well. I don't want to get into that too much because you're going to be part of another event in the festival, so I don't want to just spoil the surprise. But I do want to ask you, you are a writer as well, and I was wondering, how does your translation and writing, creative writing practice sit side by side? How do they get along?
They get along fine. You know, I have strengths and weaknesses as a translator. My weakness is I'm not bilingual. I don't know Romanian perfectly. I have to work very slowly and laboriously, and I don't take on very many projects. I'm only going to do something if I really spend time with it. My strength as a translator is that I think I can write well in English. And anything I do translate, I want to give it the kind of attention I give to my own work. And for 2000 years, I was able to do that. I didn't have to rush it. I didn't have any deadlines. So I think I spent 2 or 3 years doing it in my spare time. And then again, when I knew that the book had a publisher, I was able to, you know, I was able to see that I wasn't a good translator. I wasn't experienced. And I had to actually at that point go from translating the sense to actually making something beautiful that would be worth reading.
Would you like to share a fragment from Sebastian's translation?
I have pages here that I'll read to you from for 2000 years. This was written in 1934. At the corner towards Boulevard Elizabeta was a group of boys selling newspapers, crying death to the Druids. I have no idea why I stopped. I usually walk calmly by, because it's an old, almost familiar cry. This time I stopped in surprise, as if for the first time I had understood what these words actually meant. Strange, people are talking about death, about mine specifically, and I walked casually by thinking about it after. Why it's so easy to call for death in Romania without anyone batting an eyelid. I think though that death is a serious matter. Dog, that's already a moment of silence. If somebody set themselves up in the middle of a street to demand, let's say, death to badgers, I think that would suffice to arouse some surprise among those passing by. Now that I think about it, the problem isn't that 3 boys can stand at a street corner and cry death to the Druids, but that the cry goes unobserved and unopposed, like the tinkling of a bell on a train. Sometimes, sitting alone at home, I realize I can suddenly think of the clock. It's been beside me all along, but either because I wasn't paying attention or because I'm accustomed to it, I didn't notice it. It has got lost, along with many other familiar little noises, in a kind of silence that swallows sounds of things around you. Out of this stillness, you get suddenly caught off guard by the clock ticking with unsuspected violence and energy. Strike in short ticks like the blows of tiny metal fists. It's not a clock anymore, it's a machine gun. The sound covers everything, fills the room, grates on your nerves. I hide it in the wardrobe. It resounds even from there. I smother it beneath the pillow. The sound continues, distant, vehement. There's no cure but to resign yourself. You have to wait. And after a while, by some miracle, the attack is over, the cogs settle down, the second hand relaxes. You can no longer hear it. Ticking has blended back into the general silence of the house, merged with the general hum of all the other objects. Exactly the same thing happens with that age-old call for death, which is always present somewhere on Romanian streets, but is audible only at certain moments. Year after year, it resounds in the ear of the common man, who is indifferent, in a hurry with other things on his mind. Year after year, it rumbles and echoes in street and byway, and nobody hears it. And one day, out of nowhere, behold how it suddenly pierces the wall of deafness around it and issues from every crack and from under every stone. It is extremely difficult to follow progressive hardening of enmity from one day to the next. Suddenly you find yourself surrounded on all sides and have no idea how or when it happened. Scattered minor occurrences, gestures of no great account, the making of little threats, an argument in a tram today, a newspaper article tomorrow, broken window after that. These things seem random, unconnected, frivolous. Then, one fine morning, unable to breathe. Mihail Sebastian in 1934. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to the book. That was a couple of pages towards the end, is this sense of imminent disaster, that he's actually foreseeing what is coming and is powerless to do anything about it except express it, except express his feeling about what's happening in his world as clearly as he possibly can.
Yeah, that was very powerful. Thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you.
I will continue with our last guest for tonight, in Romania as well, but a bit farther away from Bucharest, in Cluj, Andreea Scridon. Andrei is a Romanian-American writer and translator who studied comparative literature at King's College London and creative writing at the University of Oxford. She also works as an editor for Asymptote Journal, the Oxford Review of Books, and E-Ratio Poetry, and she is also a very active team member of our Romania Rocks Festival. Welcome, Andrea. Good to see you. It's ironic a little bit because we are both in Cluj and we are still on Zoom together. I have one first question for you. You are both a writer and a translator. Do you feel that translating other people's works has impacted your work as a translator, as a writer?
Thank you, Gabriela. To answer your question, definitely. I think this happens implicitly to any author who endeavors to translate other authors' writing. And you can look at authors like Seamus Heaney or Robert Lowell, who produced very creative translations by sort of working very boldly with the original texts and making their own interpretations. In my case, I would say that it's very much linked to my identity of a hybrid of two cultures. So I grew up in both Romania and America, and for me, it's a way of reconciling, I guess, these two twin parts of myself and of defining myself, first of all.
I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised, when I heard that you are now focusing on a new translation project, among others, of course, a collection of short stories by writer and political dissident Ion Desideriu Sârbu. That, as far as I understand, will be published later this year. And I wanted to ask you what drew you to his work.
So actually, it's an interesting story because he was my grandmother's high school teacher here in Cluj. And she and her entire class of an all-girls college were sort of in love with him at the time. He would sing for them and recite poetry for them. And he was also my great-grandfather's student at the University of Cluj, and he lived around the corner. So basically, I knew him, even though he is a niche writer, for the reason that that his work wasn't published during his lifetime because he lived from 1918 to 1989. So he died just before the revolution. He was hounded by the secret police all of his life. And we've only just begun to discover him now, unfortunately. But even this tragic life story is very apparent in his writing and makes it so magnetic because he doesn't write about his own experiences in a self-pitying way, but rather with an equidistant and even ironic tone often, and even amusing, satirical.
I look forward to the book, actually, to your translation. What have you prepared as a reading for today? Is it a fragment from this book or something else?
So it is a fragment from this book and a short poem as well by a different author. So if that's okay, if you're doing well with time, I'll
Sure, of course.
Okay. So this is from a story from the Sherbu book called Two Refined Intellectuals. It's about two professors of philosophy who keep seeing each other in a public restroom, and both of them think that the other is gay because at the time it was sort of shocking. And then it becomes quite amusing because they both reveal to each other that the other thought that the other was sort of spying on him. And it's very amusing that these people who are supposedly so intellectual and I guess enlightened would think in that way. So it's a sort of satire on I guess human society. So this is how it begins. In this magnificent city of mine, Genopolis, all paradoxes are possible. There is no continuity or consequence in anything or in anybody at all. Now it's sunny, in 10 minutes time it will rain or snow. The trees are either green or blue, violet or infrared. It depends on the sky's mood, or the bird might sing. Who knows? Even the ordinary residents were very surprising. I have seen young girls that grew old in a matter of days, renowned athletes who became into books, splendid women fading after an unsuccessful night of love. Here, in our town, nobody is shocked if a savant elopes with a barely literate youth, if a cashier embezzles just for the sake of it, or if our venerable judge is caught in the public park with a milkmaid, right under the bronze statue of the gallant philosopher Napokos. Because in our town, as I said, everything is possible, even the contrary of this possible. Just the other day, for instance, as I was on my way to the university, I respectfully bowed to a nobody. That evening, coming back, I couldn't greet him anymore. He'd become, over the course of one day, the most miserable, detestable toad eater. This is the situation in our Genopolis. It's been this way forever, and I don't think it would be in vain to hope for any change. For what purpose? Whom would it benefit? Of course, personally, I am spared these pathetic mutations as an associate professor of philosophy. Looking through my translations, I came across this poem which I felt would be very appropriate to read today. It's called The Past. It's a poem by a Romanian poet and translator who is a pediatrician by day and translator Michelangelo and Shakespeare by night, Phoebe Zelatin, and it is dedicated to a woman named Gabriela. So I thought that given that Gabriela is sharing our event today, I would read it. The past. The past is built upon truth, through what it sees and what it sees. It vibrates within you, as from fountains water springs, and rises inversely through what it digs, so that its walling in under volution is an eternal diminution into diminution, always vaster, never a complete state, binding me through what it liberates. I feel my past a desert dune shifting under a changeful moon. After a storm, always taking another trait, keeping its essential trait. Always it doth an obvious guise, and what I expect to hear laughing cries. but the past too has its own calling, craving, like any night warning.
Thank you so much, Andrea. It was absolutely beautiful. And thank you to Adam, Jozefina, Gabi, Diana, Lydia, Philip, everybody who joined us today. Duncan as well, thank you very much for being with us today. So it's been an amazing get together. I'm really happy to have seen all of you, even though only via Zoom. And thank you very much to everyone who watched us today. Unfortunately, I think we are out of time, so we promise to answer any questions after the event. But do stay tuned and keep on rocking. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for arranging this. And
Yes, been really good to listen to everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much, all of
Thank
you.
you.
It's been an amazing event. I hope I did not forget anyone now at the end, because it was it was a roller coaster.
Too much pressure.
Thank you, Gabriela, and everybody else.
Yeah, thanks, Gabriela.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
to see everyone.
We'll keep in touch and have a lovely day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.